Hello and welcome back to THU TV. My name is Christopher Nichols. I'm hosting the series of talks this afternoon on creativity and technology. And I want to remind people to go check out THU TV, which is also our video on demand. That covers all the talks that are going on at THU, many of the talks that are going on at THU, and you'll be able to do that and be able to purchase that. It's a great package, really valuable. But this channel is free, and you're able to see it live on Facebook, which I'm very happy about. We've got a lot of great speakers today. Right now, we've got Cip with us.
Hi, how you doing?
How you doing?
Good.
Cip, you're from a company called Supercell?
Yeah, Supercell in Finland.
Yeah.
We make Clash of Clans, Clash Royale, Heyday, Boom Beach.
Yeah.
A lot of the sort of bigger mobile titles out there.
Yeah, those are big titles.
Yeah.
Those are huge. Those are very, very profitable titles, obviously, very well known.
Yeah.
And the mobile market is a very interesting market in general, right?
Definitely.
But what is your position there? What are you working on there?
I am senior artist there. I mean, we're sort of all senior artists there. Supercell really only hires sort of more experienced artists who are more generalists, who can, I can do animation one day, 3D modeling the next, paint overs the next, so it's a lot of freedom that we have there to do what we want, and it's a lot of personal responsibility, but if you're up for the task and you're up for, you're self-motivated, it's a good place where you can thrive.
Right.
Yeah.
So what are some of the content that you guys create? I'm just trying to help people who are trying to say, all right, so if I'm an artist at a mobile game company, what is it that I'm creating? What is it I'm making?
Right. Well, mainly I work on environments. So I like to do the arenas in Clash Royale.
Right.
Occasionally I'll help out with other areas. We have a small team, so oftentimes I have my hands in different areas at different times, depending on, where we need more work. Okay.
And so what got you there? So let's talk a little bit about your history. So how did you start getting into just creating all the way to CG and all the way forward?
Yeah, well, I sort of accidentally fell into video games.
Okay.
I never intended to become, into the video game industry. I sort of wanted to become an architect or a mechanical engineer, and then I ended up completely doing a 180 when I was applying for colleges and universities. And I decided I would apply to this art school. Okay. I didn't get in because I had no art experience.
Right.
So I had gone to this school. That school was too expensive, so I switched back to my hometown. And they had an art program there, which didn't require a portfolio, luckily.
Okay.
So I got in there, was doing some classes, and eventually this game design program had opened up. And I said,
interesting.
I like video games. I play video games. So I entered the first class that I could go to, which was a sort of animation class.
Right.
And my professor happened to be one of the art directors at Electronic Arts.
Oh, okay.
And he was looking for internships for the summer.
Yep.
And so I submitted what I had portfolio then, managed to get in, went through the summer there, and they wanted to hire me. And then from there, it's been ever since. So I started out in Electronic Arts. Did that for 4 years.
What were some of the titles you did at EA?
Well, I worked for Mythic Entertainment, which is known for Warhammer and Dark Age of Camelot and Ultima. So I worked on those franchises. We worked on a Dungeon Keeper game. And then after that, I had moved to New Zealand. Okay. Worked for Gameloft.
Okay. Oh, yeah.
So I did a couple titles out there, like a farming simulation game, and then another project which unfortunately got canceled. But then I had just moved to Supercell, and I've been working on Clash Royale ever since.
And Supercell is based where?
In Finland.
In Finland, which is where you're from?
No.
Where are you from?
It's kind of complicated, but I was born in Germany, but mainly American.
Oh, you're born in. Oh, it's not so. I've got complicated. I'm American, but I was born in Cairo, so there you go.
Oh, exactly. Yeah, military family, moved around a bunch.
Okay, all right. Well, that's cool. And so, what do you think of Finland?
It's great. It's sort of a magical place because in the summer you have 24 hours of daylight, and in the winter it's almost the exact opposite. Right. So it's a land of contrasts and sort of this sort of mystical element to it. It's definitely a cool place.
And what about Finland in terms of a couple other things? I'm wondering about how does Finland fit into either the technology kind of enterprise or the creative enterprise?
Well, I think Finland is low-key one of the industry leaders. I mean, they were known for Nokia.
Right.
You know, one of the great
yes.
phones. And Rovio has come out of there, Angry Birds.
Yep.
So they have a lot of titles, but because of the Finnish culture, it's quite humble and quite secretive. You know, they don't like to flaunt their
interesting.
You know, their success.
Mm-hmm.
And you find that with Supercell, like not oftentimes you hear about, oh, what's Supercell doing, or like, and that's something we're trying to get out more. Like we're not like this sort of secret cult.
Right.
You know, we're open. We're human beings. Yeah.
Right.
So if you want to know more, just ask us. Really.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, I think it's really interesting that you guys are doing that. But I'm curious a little bit about you've obviously done a lot of work in the mobile game world.
Right.
And I'm curious about your thoughts about mobile games in general and how effective they are on like how big they are. There's huge titles and they.
Oh, and they keep getting bigger. I mean, it's such a competitive space that you have to find new ways of innovating all the time.
Right.
Even daily, you're looking at new ways of innovating. You know, you see competitors come out with some interesting game mechanic or new ways of acquiring users, and you're like, oh, that might apply to our games, but how do we go beyond that?
Right.
How do we get that competitive edge every day? You know,
right.
it's a daily task because of the market is so volatile.
Right.
It can completely shift one way. I mean, I think we saw that with Pokemon Go.
Yeah.
Pokemon Go was one of those phenomenons where it's like mobile games can take you outside of your house.
Right.
It can, bring a community together, and that's something I think a lot of mobile companies are trying to emulate and replicate.
Yes.
Because it was such a powerful thing. You know, it was the first sort of game experience where you said, "Oh, I see that guy playing a video game on the street."
Right.
And
well, it really brought a new meaning to the word mobile game, right? Where you're actually moving.
Right, exactly. So it was just a phenomenon that I think people are like, how do we become that next thing?
But I think it's interesting because the one thing that's interesting about mobile games is that they're compared to other big title games that are on console games or PC games, those are not necessarily cheap games, right? There's thinking you have to put some thought behind before you drop $30, $40, $50, $60 on a game.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
But mobile games are way more of an impulse buy, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Way more of a, sure, I'll try it.
Well, I think that's why you find a lot of free-to-play games is
right.
There's this maybe a stigma behind mobile games is like, you need to try it first.
Right.
Then you'll see if, you want to pay $1 or something like that.
Right.
And oftentimes I think I find myself playing this game way more often than I would a console games.
Right.
But you have this perspective where you think mobile games are maybe less valuable than this big console game, even though your time is more put into this mobile game.
Sure. Absolutely, but there's also obviously some restrictions to it, right? Mobile games cannot necessarily be as high, as much technology going into it, right? You can't really show like the same amount of content because
yeah, sure. I mean, like,
but there's amazing what you can get out of a phone.
Oh, exactly. I mean,
right.
I think that's why you see a lot of shift away from sort of trying to do these more technical things into more artistic styles. And trying to bring maybe a storyline to it. I mean, you see a lot in these indie title mobile games,
right?
Who are really trying to bring this artistic element to it that you don't often see in big console games.
Right, but also, do you think that because in big console games, you don't necessarily get the same amount of immediate feedback that mobile games have, right? So, for example, mobile games, you can see when your numbers are going up and down, like on almost an hourly basis. Right?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
And so you really get direct feedback on the successes or things, and you're constantly competing on things. I can just use any game, like suddenly all these new features are around, and it's like, oh, you know what? Maybe I'll go back to playing that game again.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? And then, but because of this pay-as-you-go scenario, how does that affect your creativity? And I mean that in the sense do you feel that because when people are spending more money is because they like what you're doing, right?
Right.
So how does that affect what you're doing? It's like,
I think what we try to do is we have so many ideas for the game already that we want to accomplish, And then we look at what our players are giving us feedback on and saying, where are these people struggling? How can we help them out?
Right.
But also, how do we integrate new features that improve the game?
Okay.
So every update, we try to think of what is the most bang for the buck.
Right.
And we often just try to focus on those. Obviously, we're not going to get everything in that one update.
Right.
But we try to continue every time, try to make it more improvements and more improvements. And that's the benefit of mobile games is you can constantly update them and push out them much more quickly than you would a console game.
Yes.
I think console games are these big, slow-moving ships,
Right.
that have a huge impact if they do well.
Right.
But these mobile titles are more swift and
Some of these
agile.
mobile titles are making as much money as the biggest titles, right? Even even pay-as-you-go games.
Way more.
Way more.
I mean, I think you see a lot of game developers trying to get into that mobile space.
Right.
Because they see they are so profitable.
Right.
And it's a much lower risk than you say one of these big console games.
Tell me why it's lower risk.
For a mobile title.
Yeah.
For a console title, you have to have hundreds of employees. With mobile titles, we only have about 14 on our team.
Right.
So, I mean, it's just.
And how much time do you guys take for one of these titles?
You could get out a full game in 9 months.
Oh, wow. Compared to like some of them take 5-10 years to make.
Yeah,
right?
I mean, you look at some people are still waiting for like 20 years, and
right. Yeah.
So from that perspective, it's much cheaper. I mean, you see indie titles that do well, and they're made by one guy.
Right.
So it's in a lot of developers' benefit to actually invest in this type of industry, but unfortunately, because it's so competitive, oftentimes it's hard to get noticed.
Right.
And that's the real struggle in the mobile sphere.
Is getting noticed.
Is
right?
getting noticed.
So let's talk a little bit about that. What are some of the pressures that you feel about getting noticed and the trends that have happened over the years, and how has that affected you?
I think the biggest way to get noticed sort of in the App Store or anything like that is really with being featured on that top 100 list.
Right.
If you're not featured, you're going to get lost in obscurity.
Right.
So
how does that happen? What do you need to do to make that happen?
It's a lot of had to do with how Google and Apple feature, but really what your game is bringing new to the table that we haven't seen before. What unique gameplay are we seeing? What unique art are we seeing?
Right.
And that can go a long way. I think that you see a lot of clones of games in the mobile market that just, they may shoot up because they're saying, oh, I like this game, maybe I like this game.
Right.
But then they often go back to the original, and that one fades into obscurity.
Okay.
Yeah.
But I think it's really interesting to sort of think about the idea of like, I want to get noticed, I want to do something, and there have to be something out there. The other thing that's also interesting is the actual hardware itself, right?
Right.
You're dealing, if I'm getting, let's say, a PS4, for example, right? I know that most games will work on that piece of hardware, right?
Yeah.
So what do you make sure to enable? It's like, what I've done is really high quality, but it'll work on a variety of hardware.
Well, that's the thing you have to decide is how
broad?
How do you want people to experience your game?
Okay.
There's so many phones, different types of phones out there, Androids especially.
Right.
That you have to build your game for the lowest common denominator, and then you have to choose where do you cut that off.
Okay.
How many generations back do you support the game?
Right.
If you want your game to run smoothly and have all these effects, you're probably only going to do the top devices, but then that also limits your market.
Right.
So oftentimes what we'll do is we'll have a build for these higher end devices that has all the fancy whistles,
and
but
then you turn them off.
Cut them back for lower end devices.
Now, has this happened that people don't even notice them, or you just publish two versions of the game?
It would be two versions for different devices, depending on what you have.
Right.
So, for example, if you had, let's say, iPhone 4,
right,
and I had an iPhone 6, I might see more particle effects or more lighting,
right,
or something like that, and you might see sort of lower counts of those, or lower quality textures, something like that.
Okay. And in terms of actual gameplay and stories and things of that nature, what have you seen as a trend in terms of what's going on in there?
I think you see a lot of games trying to integrate the social element. I think
The social element.
Social element is huge in the mobile games right now. Because if you're saying most of the way people find mobile titles is through your friends.
Of course, right.
So if you want to bring that social element together, so you have this sort of friend pressure to play the game, you know?
Right.
So it's like, hey, I'm playing this game, you should play this too.
Yeah, like the first one I remember that affected me that way was Words with Friends, right?
Right, exactly.
So Words with Friends, like, my buddy played a word, I better play a word, you know, so yeah.
And this bring back to the example of Pokemon Go is
right.
you could physically see people playing this,
right.
and you got this pressure to like check it out as well. Right. Even if you only played it a day,
right.
Your first goal is to get people in the game.
Right.
And then, you know, it's the sort of gameplay and the fun of it that keeps people in.
Right.
But I think the biggest hurdle to overcome is just getting people in the game first.
Right.
And oftentimes in mobile titles, you have to get past the first 5 minutes. So you have to make that first 5 minutes really stand out.
Interesting, yeah, okay.
Because, you know, if your tutorial's too long, people don't like to read, they'll quit your game immediately.
Right. That actually brings up a good point, because one of the things I also notice about games in general, and this especially is true in mobile games, is the lack of interface, right?
Yeah.
How it's gotta be so intuitive.
Absolutely.
That the gameplay itself is like, you know, you don't have a mouse and keyboard, you don't have anything, you basically just got to touch areas in your screen. And the idea of how to navigate and move around this space is very interesting. So what are some of the things that you've seen that have helped that? Or do you feel that there's become, people are accustomed now to how to actually move around spaces?
I think people are getting more used to sort of the gestures that people are used to with different devices, you know, pinch,
right.
and zoom, or going around with a finger. I think people can understand that concept. Right. But anything beyond that gets a little more complicated, and then you start, you know, it gets too complicated for a lot of users, and they will just quit because they don't know how to play the game.
Right.
So you have to make it as simple as possible. You know, Clash Royale is just drag and drop, or just click.
Right.
That's about it.
Right.
We don't have any fancy gestures or anything like that.
Yeah, but that's the thing, right? So you sort of almost design your game around the simplicity of what it is, right?
Right. It's simple to play, but it should be more complex as you get into it.
Right.
You know, easy to learn, hard to master is basically the catchphrase.
I like that. Okay.
Yeah.
Now the other thing is your different ages, right? You have in mobile games, you actually have a much wider audience of people that are playing these games, right? So how do you know? Do you sort of gauge for a specific generation, or do you guys try to be sort of age agnostic in a lot of ways?
We try to be as age agnostic as possible. Right. I think we go for this more playful, serious. We don't want to be too kiddie, because that will isolate just for the younger generations.
Right.
But we want to try to include as many as possible.
Right.
So, yeah, I mean, Disney's a great example where they're, you know, sort of kiddish, but, you know, they have adult themes in their movies that even older audiences can appreciate.
Yep.
Like, I know, for example, when I was a kid, I never got any of the jokes in the Disney films, but you look back on it as an adult and you're like, oh, that was a little more
racy than I
racy.
thought. Yeah.
So it's sort of, that's to try to balance. We're still trying to figure out, you know, I think every new title or new IP, you struggle with that and saying, where's the line between kiddie and adult, and you just sort of go from there.
Right. So for those that are artists that are out there that want to actually try to create their own mobile game content, I know you work for a really great company, Supercell, but if people want to go out there and say, okay, what are some of the top things that I can take away to learn about making something, or what kind of technology do I need to learn? Where would I need to go to say, okay, I've got an idea for a mobile game, where do I get started? What would you advise someone to do like that?
Right. Well, I mean, there's so many great tools out there now with different engines you can use.
Right.
Unity, Unreal. I know there's some other free platforms.
Right.
So all you really need is someone to code, someone to do the art.
That's it.
That's about it. I mean.
And what kind of coder would you look for?
One who knows. Sorry, I'm not really a coder, but I guess,
but
Java.
You work with coders, right?
Yeah,
So,
absolutely. I mean,
but don't even the Unity and Unreal engines help you with that code a little bit?
Yes,
well?
yes. But you still need, if you want to do something custom or something like that.
Got it. You still need someone to program it.
Right. I mean, it definitely helps to have that background.
Okay. So if you start with that and you basically say, if you're going to do an indie title and you basically don't want to have to massively learn something new.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
So you need someone that's like, if I got someone that's mostly good at coding and I got someone that's mostly good at art.
Yeah.
And you put them together, it's probably pretty easy with a few tools to be able to create a good mobile
Absolutely,
game.
yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And then once they do that, and they've created the game, then they would just publish it to the Android or
yeah, I mean, I think Apple and Android makes it really easy to publish games.
Right.
I mean, hundreds of games come out daily.
Right.
So, people are obviously doing it and finding it quite easy to do.
Okay. And those games are obviously, like you said, very profitable. Do you think the idea, I'm just going to go through the price, just because it's fascinating to me, and I finally got someone that can ask these questions. Do you see a trend that now that pretty much, it used to be that games were like $2, $3,
right,
whatever. Now they're almost all free to play.
Right.
Right? But do you see that as a trend that's going to continue to happen?
I think if I was a businessman, I would say yes. That's definitely, because you just see it. I mean, a premium title that costs like $1 or $2, you're limiting how much money you can make off of the game just by the initial downloads.
Right.
That's how much you can make. But free to play, you can make.
You can continue
making. I mean, I've actually seen in a lot of premium titles now, they'll have sort of these freemium elements in them to get you to spend more money on them.
Right.
So like you'll find that you can unlock the whole game for $2, but if you want some like extra costume or something like that, you can pay like $1 or $2.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting trend, but I'm very curious about where that business model is going. Obviously, it's very profitable. It's a lot of people out there. I think a lot of people love to play. I know my kids, they love to play video games on our tablets. And the other thing I like about it is, you're not like, all right, I'm into it. I'm going to play, Gears of War or whatever, and I got to put the headset on. It's like a commitment, right?
Yeah, right.
And the other ones is like, I got a few minutes here.
Exactly.
And you can just do something interesting. And just the concept of how you design that process, to think about making those short levels or those short moves short things. It's a completely different way of thinking of video games, I think. And you've been doing it from the beginning, right?
You want to have these sort of short bursts of fun. I mean, in Clash Royale, for example, we limit it to 3 minutes.
Right.
I think everyone can find 3 minutes while they're waiting for a bus.
Right.
Or, anywhere they're going. You probably have 3 minutes to play at least one game.
Okay.
But back to the sort of free-to-play point was, I think the free-to-play business model is not perfect.
Sure.
It's, there's this one way of doing it now that it's been working, but I think there are other avenues that games can take and that I want to see games take.
Right.
So it doesn't feel like, if I need to spend money in order to be good at this game.
Yeah, you feel like some people do mention they feel like they're being cheated, right? Like, I'm not getting everything unless I pay money. It's like, well...
But you're getting hundreds of hours of enjoyment.
Yes.
It's all about perspective. Right. It's like, you'll spend $5 on a coffee, but you won't spend $1 on hundreds of hours that you played.
Right.
So I think that needs to probably change, but it's sort of a slow moving process.
I get it. I understand the business part. I understand the other point of view.
I mean, personally, I don't like talking about it because I don't like.
No, but there maybe there will be some other solution where people feel justified. It's like they feel everything feels fair. But I don't think necessarily it's unfair, right? I think you're right. It's a good model, and you're getting great content, and people continue to make money off things. That's the whole point. You know? So I think that people expect a lot for free these days.
Exactly. Yeah.
And it's good to do that. All right. Well, listen. Where can they follow you and your work? Can you mention your website or your Twitter?
CiprianiArt.com. I don't really have any other social platforms.
Okay.
Yeah, you can find me on Facebook.
I saw your site. It looks great.
Yeah.
You got a lot of great content there, and you can see the kind of stuff that you do and you've been doing. Which I think is really, really cool. And Supercell, obviously, you can go to their website and check out some of the stuff they're doing.
Check it out. We have job openings.
There's job openings. Great. Let people know about that. And what are some of the game titles that you finished recently that you can talk about? I think we meant, which ones are the ones that you would recommend people try out if they're going to try something?
I mean, definitely check out Clash Royale.
Okay, Clash Royale.
Sort of my baby at the
moment.
Your baby?
Yeah. Awesome. All right, we'll definitely do that. All right, thank you so much, guys. I
Cheers.
really appreciate it.